Thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks ADP for hosting us. My name is Zaneski, and I have the privilege of serving as a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. We'll play with Twilio a little bit later and talk more about it. But does anyone want to take a guess what I'm doing in this awesome little pixel art my coworker made? I'm not holding a sword. I'm changing a light bulb because tall people jokes are fun. Yeah. Cool. So what we're all here to learn and talk about is this really cool library called Socketio. So Socketio, if you're not familiar, it is a WebSocket library. And if you're not familiar with what a WebSocket is, we got to take a step back and talk about what HTTP is. So HTTP is this protocol, how we can communicate with web servers and get resources from them. So when an HTTP request is made, it's considered to be a stateless request, right? There is a initial part of the request, and there's a response from the server. And that's it. It's like a very nice, like, hey, how you doing? Can I please have this web page? Here's your web page. Have a great day. And then there's no further communication unless requests are remade. So the connection is stopped then. It's just a one-time event. So when we have a WebSocket, it's a bidirectional connection that stays open. So both parties can write down the WebSocket and read from the WebSocket at the same time. So they can actually have a real-time conversation, which is really good because all of our web apps today have a very important real-time component, whether it's a chat, whether it's a real-time stock ticker. WebSockets really gave us this power that were usually done with hacks in the past. We had AJAX long polling. We had GIF sockets where you would stream GIF data. It was a crazy hack that was really impressive. But WebSockets actually made it so that we can have these bidirectional communications in the browser. And it really brings a lot of cool things and opportunities. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw together a web app today. And we're going to write some codes, because codes are fun. I know live coding can be pretty boring to people. We're going to try to spice it up. Since there's a lot of experts in the room, I want you to call out something that if I do differently than you would, I'd love to know. I'd love to have a conversation about it. I'd love to not be standing up here quietly for 30 minutes. So if there's something that I choose differently or a different framework or plugin, let me know what you would have done. Obviously, be respectful. We want everyone to be welcomed here. It's a welcoming community. Don't make anyone feel uncomfortable. And same with the beginners. If there's any questions that you have about things that I didn't explain well, please just stop me, raise your hand, let me know, and we can explain it further. That work for everyone? Awesome. All right, so let's just dive right into codes. So the app that I want to build it's really simple. It's actually not that much code at all. And it is going to be a message board chat room style-esque thing. So there's going to be a text box. We're going to be able to type a message in, and it is going to show up. So you could think this is maybe posted on a wonderful wall like this during the workday where people can post things, maybe at a conference. So it's like a bulletin board type message app. And then we're also going to add an SMS component where you can text in, and it'll show up with a picture or whatever you text in. So we'll do that towards the end to show how reusable these components can be. So the first thing we have to do, and if you can't read this, let me know. The resolution's like wonky. OK, so I'm going to make a new directory, and we're just going to call this message board. And then I'm going to initialize an NPM project. Ooh. Thank you. So pro tip, if you didn't know, you can throw a -y at that, and you don't have to hit enter all the time. So npm init-y, it's magical. And now we need to install just a few packages. I hope you brace yourself, because there's a lot of npm coming. So I'm going to type all these out. I got down a pretty good cadence to get them all, and then we'll stop and explain what they are while it's installing. So we're going to need Express. We're going to need body parser. We are going to need a small library called React and React DOM. We are going to need Socketio. We're going to need Webpack. We're going to need the Webpack dev middleware. We're going to need Babel's core. We're going to need the Babel loader for Webpack. We're going to need the Babel preset ES 2015. We're going to need the Babel this is really dry, I'm sorry. As soon as we get through this, it'll be more fun. Preset for React. We need the Babel plugin to transform class properties. And I think that's everything. Cool. So while this is installing, let's talk about what all these are. So Express, if you haven't heard of it before, it's the most popular web framework for Node. It's a very simple micro framework. It's really easy to use. We'll see how it works. Body parser is a plugin. It'll parse out HTTP bodies. Usually this is included with the framework, but the JavaScript world is very modular, if you can't tell from all these packages. So this will let us parse out those HTTP bodies. React and React DOM are just a tiny library to do some cool things. Socketio is the WebSocket library that we're going to use. We chose Socketio because it abstracts away a ton of complex things for us, like handling reconnection logic. It has exponential backoff. It does all these things. So you can use native WebSockets. It's definitely faster, but Socketio is like the best framework. It's one of my favorite libraries. Webpack is a modular bundle. So this will let us take all of our JavaScript client-side code and actually pack it into one big JavaScript file that we're going to serve. The Webpack dev metalware is something that we plug into Express that will serve that bundled JavaScript file that gets created. The Babel core is Babel's a transpiler. It transpiles fancy JavaScript into JavaScript that can run in the browser. So the Babel core is what's going to give us that power. Babel loader is the plugin for Webpack. So it will allow Webpack to use Babel and run Babel on our code as it transforms it. The Babel presets are for new JavaScript features from ES 2015 and React. And the Babel plugin transform class properties. We'll see later. It's just going to make our lives easier. We don't have to do some binding things when it comes to React components. So it looks like that all worked. And I'm pretty happy I didn't type anything wrong. So the first thing we have to do is get our config file out of the way. This is kind of boilerplatey. It's going to be the same every time you approach this unless you have something really specific. I really just copy and paste this from project to project. So I'm going to create a Webpack config called Webpack config.js. And let me know if you can't read it, please. And we need to export a module. And the first thing we need is the entry point of our application. So this is where our client-side JavaScript is going to live. And it's going to start at the dir name. So this is the current directory. And it's going to live in a folder called source. And then it needs an output. So this is where it's going to shoot it out to. Because we're using that DevPack middleware for Express, we are going to just set the path to the root. So it'll just be at /bundle.js. And then we need to, I'm going to turn a dev tool on so we can get source maps in case I screw anything up. And then we need the module loaders. So this is where we're going to plug in Babel. So this is a list of loaders it's going to run, which are all individual objects. And then we need to test all the files that are coming into Webpack. So this is just a regular expression that will check for files ending in a JavaScript extension. And then we need to tell it what loader we want to run on it, and it's the Babel loader. And then we need to pass in some query args. So this is usually configurable in like 6 different ways, as with everything in JavaScript. The query args are really just telling Babel what transforms and plugins to run on our code. You can pass this as a Babel RC file. It's like a .babel RC in your directory. I'm not a big fan of hidden files in my folders that have a significant impact. That's why I like to do it here. So the first query we need is the presets. And this is a list of those presets. And then we need plugins. So the presets really just hold a collection of plugins, so you don't have to include them all manually, because who needs more dependencies? And we need the transform class properties. Okay. And that's really it. This is very boilerplatey. You use this a lot of the same times. You can copy and paste this thing in almost every React project you do. I haven't found a real big need to do anything different unless you want to do like hot module reloading. But for the sake of this, we'll just use this. And so now that that's created, we're going to create 2 folders. We're going to create a public folder to hold our index HTML file, and that source folder where our client-side JavaScript code is going to live. Cool. So now I'm going to create that index file because we're not going to do much HTML. And I have this plugin called Emmet. It's really cool if you haven't heard of it before. You write like small things and it can expand them out. So I need a root div to mount my React component to, and a script tag that's going to pull in bundle.js. And that's it for the HTML. That's always nice. And now we can create our Express server. So a couple more imports to do. Very boilerplatey, but we just got to get it out of the way. So we're going to pull in that Express library. And we need the HTTP module. And we need the body parser. And we should grab Socketio. And so now we need to pull in a bunch of different Webpack things. This is the dev middleware. It's a lot easier to use than compiling the file and serving it, I think. So we got to pull in Webpack. I'm going to paste that 3 times. We have to grab the dev middleware. And then we need our Webpack config, which is just that file that we wrote. Cool. And so now we can actually create an instance of Express. If you haven't used it before, it's just a HTTP library. It's really simple. It does all our routing for us. So by getting an instance of it, we call it app. It's just convention. And then we have to do something a little different than usual. We have to create an HTTP server ourselves and hand it our app. And this is for Socketio. And this is really just what Express would do under the covers when you go to start it up. And so now we can create a new instance of Socketio and hand it our web server that we created to bind to it. Great. So now we need to use 3 middlewares on our Express app. And middlewares are really, so how Express does routing is the request comes in, and it kind of just has an array of different things, different functions to call on this request. And the middlewares are just functions that get called on every request that comes in. So it can process the data. That's where the body parser is going to parse out the HTTP body and give us a JavaScript object we can work with. So I'm going to use, the first one is Express static. And this will just serve static files out of a directory. So it's going to serve our HTML page out of public. And then we're going to use, so this is my favorite line to type. So we're going to take the Webpack dev middleware, and we need to give it a Webpack compiler. And the Webpack compiler has to take in the Webpack config. So there's a lot of Webpack in that line. And then the last one is the body parser. And we're going to use the URL encoded. And we don't want to parse out fancy bodies extended. Cool. And that's it. So we're going to start up our server. And this is a real important gotcha if you're using Socketio like this. Normally, you'd listen on app if you're just doing Express. But if you do that, everything will work, except your WebSockets will not get connected. And you'll spend hours trying to figure out what the hell you did wrong. So remember, if you're using Socketio, make sure you start on the server and not the app itself. And the last file we need to create is that index for our client-side code. So we're going to import React, and then import React DOM. And then we're going to grab the Socketio client-side JavaScript. All right, now we're done with all of our setup, so that's great. Oop, I spelled client wrong. I'm loving that people are catching this. All right, so I'm going to create my first component. It's going to be called app. And so I'm just going to use one big component for all this. Normally, you'd want to break it out, but for continuity's sake and to save time, we're just going to put everything in one component. And this is going to extend React.component. And we're going to define that render method. And it's going to return us a div with just h1 hello world for now. And then we just have to mount it to our DOM. So we're going to mount our app to our mount point, which was our root div. Cool. So if we fire up the server, and this should print out a bunch of lovely looking compiling text. Fingers crossed. There we go. OK. Webpack bundle is valid. So if we go to our browser and we hit that at localhost 3000, where our server is running on, we got our hello world component. So I didn't screw anything up yet, and that's great. Yeah, thank you. So that npm install line is very convoluted, believe me. OK, so cool. So now we have our basic hello world for React. And so now I'm going to structure out what our chat app is going to look like. It's going to be very bare bones. So I'm first going to put a constructor on a React class, and this is where we're going to set the initial state. And we need to pass in props here, or else it'll be mad at us. And because it's OO, we need to call super on it. And then we can set the state. to an initial object. So I'm thinking we'll have a messages key in our state that will just have a list of messages that come in. And again, if I'm doing something you would do differently, please just let me know. I'd love to talk about it. Great. So in our render method, we're going to map over all of these messages from the state and create a new list item for each one. And we'll just throw those in an unordered list on the page. So that will be our chat for now. We could style it later at some point. So I'm going to create messages, and it's going to take our state, and it's going to map over it. And this will take in a single message and an index of the array. And then we're just going to return a new list item with the key for React's ordering of the index. And in here, we'll put a bold tag, and we'll put the from. So this will either be your Socketio ID or your phone number, the last 4 of it. So this is going to be message.from. So the message is going to have a from. And we'll put a colon there. And then we'll put the body outside the bold. Great. And then we just have to render those messages, because it's just a list of React components. So we can just toss it right on the return there. Cool. So no errors. Great. And so now we need a text box, because this is going to be a chat first. So you'll be able to type right on the web page. So I'm going to create a new input tag. And it's going to be of type text. And it's going to have a placeholder of enter a message. And we need a on key up callback event. So we're going to listen for the event key. And we'll say this will be handle submit, because we're going to submit a message. Cool. So if I refresh, we should have our text box. Great. And now we need to create this handle submit callback. So whenever this message is typed and hit enter, we're going to add it to the state. So let's do that right here. So this is where that transform class properties come in. You'll see it'll look kind of confusing, but it just saves you from binding headaches. So we're going to call handle class, handle submit is going to equal, and this is just going to be a Lambda function. So it will take in an event. And this is just setting the property on the class. And we'll pull out the body of that event, which is going to be under the event target and the value, so just the value of that text box. And then we need to check if this was an enter key was pressed. So if event.keycode equals 13, that's the key code for an enter key. And we'll also check if there's actually something in the body. Cool. So now we can actually create a new message and push it into the state and have it set state so it re-renders the whole component. So let's say message is going to equal this object, and we'll stick the body on there. And then we'll say the from is just going to be me for now, because this is going to be coming from us. And then we can take our state. We can set the state of messages. And we can stick in that message we just created. And using the fancy ES 2015 spread operator, we can spread that out. So this is basically appending our new message to the top of the list. So it'll show up at the very beginning. And we should set the value of that text box to empty so you can keep typing. So let's do that. Let's say event.target.value equals an empty string. And I'm going to refresh and type something and really hope it works. Great. So just like that, we have our state being sent. So this is a one-person chat room. This is cool. I can keep typing messages. They'll appear at the top. But I want to make this into an actual chat room where we all can chat. So this is where we get to use Socketio. And Socketio, like I said, it's definitely one of my favorite libraries. It's really simple to use, and it's really simple to add the real-time effect and powers you get from having a WebSocket to an app. So you'll see it's minimal code. So if we come to our server, we'll do it there first. We have our I/O library. So this is the library that holds all of our I/O connections. It has all the methods to send and listen for events. And the first event we have to listen for is the connected event, a connection event. And this happens whenever a new WebSocket connects to the server. So we'll listen for connection, and this will give us a socket, a callback function with a socket in it. And now we can tell that socket that it should listen for message events. So our client is going to send a message event. And our client's just going to send the body of the message event. So what we're going to do is we're going to emit this to all the other clients that are listening. And the way we do that without emitting it to ourselves is to take our socket, and it's called the broadcast method. So broadcast will send it to every socket but ourselves. Normally, you can just do socket.emit if you want to reply directly to the socket, but we want to send it to everyone else. So we're going to emit another message event. And the great thing about the socket IO is you can just reuse all these events that happen on the same thing. And we need to give it an object, so it's going to take in that body. And if this looks unfamiliar to you, this is the new ES 2015. I don't even know what this one's called. But it basically expands. If the variable name and the key name are going to be the same, it will expand it for you. So you don't have to put this colon itself there. So you'll see a lot of people naming so they can do it that way. Cool. And so now we need a from. So from, I'm just going to use the socket ID. And it's really long, so we're just going to slice it for like 8 characters. Cool. So I'm going to restart the web server. And now we need to add socket IO to the client. And the best place to actually initialize this socket IO thing is not in the constructor, because it's a network event. They say all these network events should go in the component will mount lifecycle event. So I'm going to put that there. And this, I can't spell this word for some reason. There we go. Component will mount. And we'll take the socket, so we'll say this.socket equals that IO library we have. So this is the client-side socket IO library. And we can just connect it right to the root of the web server. So that will trigger that on-connection event on the web server. And then we want to set a listener for new messages that come in. So we'll say on message. It'll give us a message. And this is a full message, not just a body. And we're actually just going to copy this line. It'll be the same kind of thing. So we'll set the state with the new message and append it to the top of the list. And this will cause the React component to re-render completely. And then down here, we need to emit that event on the client side. So whenever that submit happens, we hit enter. We should send that message to trigger the on message on the server. So if we take the socket and we emit message, and we will give it the message. I'm sorry, just the body. We only said the body. Cool. Great. So does anyone have any questions about this so far?
That should go in did mount.
That should go in did mount. Which one? This should go in did mount. OK, great. Cool. That's good to know. Any other questions? Yes?
I know you explained this. Could you explain again why you put it in did mount and not in the constructor?
Yeah, so let's just pull it up on the... So the question is, why do you put it in the component did mount and not in the constructor? And that's because they tell you to in the documentation, because the constructor is going to happen initially, and the component did mount, it's something that can happen async, so it doesn't have to block or wait for it. And yes, component did mount. Great. So this is where they tell you to do it. Cool. Thank you for that tip. That's good to know. All right. So I think that's everything. We already started the server. Let's do it again. And I'm going to use this really cool dev tool called EndRock. Has anyone heard of it before? NGROK? It'll change your life one day. It's amazing. It's free to use. And it lets you take your local dev server. You tell EndRock what port it's running on, and it will give you a publicly accessible URL that you can use to test webhooks or share people. It's used at hackathon demos and all these different things all the time. So go check out EndRock, NGROK. It's amazing. It's made by an ex-Twilio employee. So I'm just starting it up here. I'm saying EndRock, telling it HTTP protocol on port 3000, and we pay for it, so I get to pick my own subdomain. So if you all want to join in the chat, you can go in here on your phone to easy.endrock.io So I'm going to open it up over here. And I'm going to say something and really hope that it works. Ah, it's working for someone. Great. So just like that, we have a real-time chat. It was very simple to build, right? There was barely any socket communication we had to do. It's all just events. And as JavaScript developers, we love events. They're just fun to work with, right? So use semicolons, yeah. So since someone brought that up, I've been using the standard JS code style, whatever we want to call it. I don't agree with all the rules, but it's nice to have a binary that I can run, and it tells me if I followed something. So with standard JS, you can just run standard on our server. Oh, it's pissed I did something wrong. Oh, OK, so I'm supposed to use path.join. So it's great. It basically does ESLint and everything for you. And that's what I like about it. It's definitely, like I said, I don't agree with every message, every rule, but awesome. Right, so this is cool. Emacs, yeah, I'm a big Vim fan. All right. So we have this awesome chat. You're all chatting with each other. And we did that really quick. That wasn't much time at all. So now I want to add in an SMS component. So I work for a company called Twilio. It's a communications API. We're most well known for our SMS and voice APIs, so you can send and receive text messages into your app and make and receive phone calls. And I'm just going to go walk through that real quick. So I need to buy a phone number. It's the basic unit of Twilio. So I can just go in here and say I want a New York phone number or something that's close to New York. And Newark, New Jersey sounds great. So I'm going to click this buy button. And just like that, I've bought a phone number. I can do this all I want, give it out on my Tinder profile, which I do not have. My girlfriend's sitting in the front row making faces at me. And great, so I have this awesome phone number. And the way it works is I configure this phone number with where my web server lives. So when you text this phone number, Twilio is going to make an HTTP post request to my server and says, hey, here's all the cool things about that text message that you care about. So it basically knows how to speak the old telephone and talks what developers like, which is HTTP. So I'm just going to tell it where my web server is running. And that's at http://easy.endrock.io. And so whenever that text comes in, it's just going to make a post to the web server. I'm just going to copy this. And we'll put this in here, just like we did before. And now we get to write some more server code. So up until now, we really haven't used Express other than Socketio. So we're going to set a post handler to listen for that post request. And it takes in a request and a response. Is everyone familiar with Express? Has anyone not used Express before? A couple people? Cool. So this is a very common pattern you'll see in most micro web frameworks that you're using. Flask uses it. It's inspired by Sinatra. It's the concept of a very simple router. So we have this route that it's listening to. So in this case, our slash, our root URL. And then it has some kind of callback function. And that takes in a request object, which has all the information of the request. And response is some kind of buffer that we can write into. And it's just very straightforward. It's a micro framework. We love this paradigm. So out of that request, I'm going to pull out the body and the from. And you might ask, why are these capital? Because a lot of these words are reserved in different languages, so we made them capital. It's real fun when you do Python, because from is reserved in Python. You have to use underscore from. So I'm pulling out the request, the body and the from the text message. So body will have the body of the text, and from will have the phone number. And we just want to create a new message. So we'll say body is body, and from is going to be the phone number, and we'll slice to the last 4 digits. And then we just have to emit that to all the clients. So before we were using the socket.broadcast.emit to only emit to everyone but ourselves. Now we want to emit to everyone, because there's no actual client connected. So we just do this with io.emit, and it'll emit a message event. And we're just going to send that message. And we just need to reply to Twilio, or else I'll get emails about things not working. So I'm just going to send back twiml, which is XML commands that tell Twilio what to do. So it just starts with a response, and in there's a message. And this is going to be interacted when the reply is done. So you text, Twilio will get this response, and it's going to send back a text message. So I'm going to say, thanks for texting. And the libraries we have generate that for you, so you don't have to write XML all the time. And cool. So I think this is going to work, I hope. So I'm going to restart the web server. See all the sockets reconnecting. And there's the Webpack bundle. Oh gosh, there's so much in here. I'll leave that one open to read it later. All right, so if you want to take out your phone, play along at home, so I'm going to send a text message in here. And we see it just came through. So the webhook came in. It's got the last four of my phone number and just what I texted it. So the phone number, if you want, is 862-256-2970. Look at that. Awesome. So it's working for some other people as well. So that's it. We have an awesome real-time web app. We added another medium, and because these components are reusable, it really shows the power of React. We're able to add a new input source for our message just like that. Like, it just works. We're using the same events, the same kind of component logic. So the last thing I want to do, since everything's already built up, is I want to add in pictures, so you can MMS in a picture. And it's really simple to add on top of this. So along with these body and from that come from the post request, we're going to pull out the media URL. So this will just have a S3 link, Amazon S3, to the picture that you send in. And you can send more than one picture, so we're just going to pull the first one, which is 0. And I'm going to say the key of that one should be image, and it's going to be media URL. So I'm just sticking it in the message. And then inside of our map, where we're creating those message elements, we're just going to check if the image exists on the message and throw it on the page. So we'll say image is going to equal message.image. And if it does, we use ternary. It's going to create a new image tag with the source of message.image. And we'll set a fixed width on there so it doesn't look ugly. We'll say 200 pixels. And then if that's not there, we'll just return null. And if you render null in React, it's very happy. It's very functional. It'll just work. So I'm just going to tag it on right after the body. Save that and restart the server. And there's all the clients reconnecting. That's awesome to see. Webpack's telling us to wait. All right, cool. So I'm going to refresh one more time. And I'm going to send a picture of the audience. Someone already did it. That's awesome. Someone's trying to do JavaScript injection. Thankfully, React does that for you by default. All right, everyone, put your hands in the air. Woo! All right. These are awesome. There we go. Cool. So just like that, we've added real time. We've added a bunch of different things to a very simple React app. Someone else did it too. That's awesome. The power comes from how reusable these components are, right? We've seen the power of React. We're all believers. We understand it. It's functional paradigms. It just makes everything better. It's the single direction data flow. We could break this out. We could do a bunch of different things. And Socketio, it's all just event-based. So just to walk through again, we got our connections, we got our messages, and it's just ping-ponging messages back and forth. And on that note, if you ever do a Hello World Socketio, do not use ping and pong as your event names, because they are reserved by Socketio, and it will fail silently. But you'll still get the heartbeat triggered for ping and pong, so it'll look like your code is happening sporadically, and you'll spend hours debugging it. I'm telling the story of a friend. This didn't happen to me, so yeah. But that's really all I have. I'd love to talk about some of the decisions I made. I'd love to talk about the questions you have. Other than that, thanks all for coming, and I hope this wasn't boring. I hope live coding was fun for you. Thank you. And I'll put the code on GitHub so everyone can get it. We'll post it on the meetup. So, any questions from anyone? Conversations? Yes, in the back.
Can you do it with hot reloading, or does it conflict?
Can you do it with hot reloading, or does it conflict? I think it will work with hot reloading. Hot reloading will just trigger when you save the file. So this will, the Socketio components will just work. we should have done something in here like component will unmount or component did unmount, and that's where we would disconnect the Socketio client. So it's being reusable. So yeah, great question. Any others? Yes?
What is your Vim configuration?
What is my Vim configuration?
He wants to know how you do autocomplete with Vim as well. Cool.
So my Vim configuration, my dot files are on GitHub. I can post them in a meetup group too. The autocomplete for Vim is this awesome project called Turn. It's beautiful. It's made by Marine. He's the guy who made CodeMirror and ProseMirror, and he's smart as hell. So Turn, T-E-R-N, gives you the auto-completion for a bunch of different editors. There's a Turn for Vim plugin. And you also need uCompleteMe, which is syntax-aware completion for Vim. So it does everything for you. It's beautiful. And it can check the new JavaScript modules too. And it's awesome. And then if you're doing like promises, it'll tell you what the callback function is supposed to. It's beautiful. I love it. Any other questions? Yes?
With Emmet Vim, I've noticed that it doesn't include the closing slash, which causes Babel to, or the JSX Babel compiler to blow up.
Yeah.
Have you found a workaround for that?
So the question is, with Emmet for Vim, Emmet is the auto-completion of tags. So it's what I was doing with like li, and then on Vim I can do Control-Y, comma, and it expands it for me. It doesn't, if you do something like an image tag, it doesn't add the closing slash, which will piss off Babel, because every component is supposed to close itself. I have not found a solution. I just manually know to do it and go over. But it's definitely worth thinking about. It's a good one. Any other questions? Yes?
What are some of the most creative use cases you've seen for Socketio? Besides the chat room or stock picker, like you suggested, where have you seen it used?
So I'll show you another demo, actually. So this is, I was in school 3 or 4 years ago at Hack&Y, which is the hackathon. He's wearing a wonderful shirt of it. Hack&Y is the student hackathon in New York. It's an awesome fellowship program. And my buddy and I built a small app. Let me see if it'll load up. And this is like 4 years ago. This is when WebSockets were first becoming standardized. And I think the code will still run. OK. So this is AirDrum. It's, like I said, very old code. But if I pull it up on my phone, and that URL is wrong. So we use the accelerometer data and the compass on the phone. To make a drum set that you can play. So this is all done with streaming the accelerometer events from the phone. This is before like there were awesome libraries to figure out accelerometer, so we're doing like stupid math to calculate it. But it works most of the time. It was fun. So yeah, this is what we built. I think this is a creative use. It was just really fun to play with. There's a lot of chat apps. There's a lot of drawing apps that are done. Basically anything in real time. A bunch of games can do it. Now with Socketio 1.0, you can send binary data over the WebSocket, and it's very fast. It uses like a uint whatever array in JavaScript. And people have made awesome Canvas games with it. It's multiplayer. So yeah, Socketio, it's just so much fun. Like, I'm a big fan of it. Any other questions? Yes?
What if my backend is not Node?
What if your backend's not Node? So there are different Socketio implementations for different languages. So there's one for Flask, there's one for Sinatra, for Ruby, Flask is Python. So the bindings do exist. I haven't used many of them. Other than that, there's some kind of WebSocket implementation for just about every framework there is. I'm sure it's just as usable as Socketio. But what I really like about Socketio, I didn't say this before, is it doesn't always use WebSockets. It knows how to fall back onto those other methods we talked about. So it knows how to do the long polling. It knows how to do the AJAX. It knows how to do gift sockets. And it will slowly, like, pessimistically roll back onto the old features. So it'll basically work on every browser, even like the old IEs. So it's a really great library. Any other questions? Yes?
Better to use React for Socketio versus like a different framework. Right now, I see that basically each component never like refreshes, or like never refreshes when you use Socketio. So like, what benefit is React versus like using different frameworks?
Okay, so the question is, what benefit does using React with Socket.io give you? What I like about it is we saw how easy it was to just have our actual chat app using the one direction data principles we love with React, so this composability. Like I said, we probably should have broken this out into like a bunch of different components. We should have one for the chat box, one to hold the whole chat scenario thingy, and all these composable components are really just prime meat for something like Socket.io to jump into. So it just hooks into the different lifecycle events. So you could use Socket.io with any framework. I'm not sure if it gives like immense benefits over using Angular or even jQuery out of the box or native HTML. But the fact that our state management just happens, like when this emit comes in, we just call set state and everything updates. We're not like, I guess it's like the same benefits you get from React, right? Just like with Facebook's chat is the story everyone tells, right? They had the unread chat icon, and they had that in like 6 different places to update. They had it in the little jewel at the top, on the chat bar, at the bottom, on the left side. So every time they added a new feature, someone would forget to manually fix one of those, and it would just break chat all the time. So that's why they actually created React, is to not have to think about those different things. You just think about what your component should look like, and you give it the data that it needs, and it's just like, shit, like I'm just going to render. I know what to do. And it's really fun. That's why I love React. So. Any other questions? Yes?
When you want to use Socket.io outside of an actual component, maybe something into like Redux, how do you organize that?
So I have yet to do that. I definitely think there's GitHub projects out there. Oh, sorry. The question is, if you were to use Socket.io outside of actual React and use it in something like Redux or a Flux implementation, how would you do that? I'd assume you just have the action creators just handle those, and you dispatch them, and it'd probably be something you'd want to do with like thunks or sagas in Redux. That's a good question. I might go play with it. See what you come up with too. I'd imagine it's just like actions. You just actions and emits and all there, and you just have the socket available as a state that everything can use, all the different reducers. So, any other questions?
Would you use Socket.io for enterprise, or would you build your own?
Would I use Socket.io for enterprise, or would I use my own socket implementation or a different one? I guess it really depends. I definitely don't work on enterprise things. I think it's battle tested at this point, and it has the fallback, so it can fall back to all those things. So if your enterprise has to support old IEs, I think it's great, and it handles all of those reconnection logics for you, which, like, let's face it, that would take time to write. Like, people have full test suites to figure out those exponential backoffs and things. So I'd assume it would be great for enterprise. There's a ton of companies using it. I think they're all on the website, so I would check out who's using it. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thanks, ADP, for having us. Thanks, David and Citrusbyte, for organizing the meetup. And let's hang out and come let me know the cool things you're going to work on. So thank you.